Hello, BookTube. I've recently been doing a book club with Matthew at Mayberry Book Club. Uh, he of the tiny house and the enormous cats. And we've been bouncing all around in the books that we're going to do. I have plenty of ideas for future read-alongs, one per month. But at one that we did was a classic graphic novel, Batman Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. Uh, Classic in the sense that it's canonical. It's been pastiched and quoted in Batman films. It's been adapted to a cartoon. There are many, many calls for it to be explicitly adapted to a Hollywood movie. And it's been parodied a million times and had a huge, deep impact on the DC comics that followed it. Batman has never been the same since Batman Dark Knight Returns. But even though it is iconic in all of those ways, it isn't particularly good. And this is not a contradiction, right? There are plenty of things that are iconic without being good. And Matthew is a newcomer to this stuff completely and noticed, of course, that it starts strong and then falls apart. So that reading experience was a bit of a disappointment for him. And then we did the Iliad, and that was not a disappointment for him, but I felt I owed him one. I felt I owed him not only a graphic novel, but a Batman graphic novel that would work on every level. It might not be as iconic as Batman Dark Knight Returns, but it would work much better for him as a story. And so we chose Batman Year One, which is written by Frank Miller, same as Batman Dark Knight Returns, but it's drawn by David Mazzucchelli, who has a very different artistic style than Frank Miller. Not as exaggerated, not as cartoony, not as noir, much more photographic, much more real world. Just wonderful stuff. Absolutely wonderful stuff. And I want to show you some of that art. Because this, we see, let me see if I can get to where we're going here. We see in this first issue is titled Who I Am, How I Came to Be. And that does not just refer to Bruce Wayne returning to Gotham City after almost 2 decades away. The Gotham City where, when he was a boy, his parents were shot dead in front of him. That origin story is rehearsed in Batman Dark Knight Returns. It's rehearsed in pretty much every Batman movie. It's rehearsed in maybe every Batman appearance. It's a motif. Writers very much want you to know that that the trauma of the murder of his parents in front of him is what set Bruce Wayne on the path to become Batman. And this graphic novel is no exception. Batman Year One originally was 4 issues in the Batman run. So like Batman Dark Knight Returns, it sort of lends itself to a month-long read-along because it's got 4 parts. And in the first part, the title refers not only to Bruce Wayne returning home. He has had years and years of exotic training, exotic experiences, a middle period that has no definitive story to it. It's also Jim Gordon, Police Commissioner Gordon, who a lot of you will know from the various actors who have played him on the big screen. A lot of you of a certain age will remember the wonderful job that was done by the actor who played him on the Batman TV series. He has always been an odd counterweight to Batman. He is the person whose job it is to uphold law and order in a city that Matthew, in his video, I'll leave a link to Matthew's video down below, refers to as without hope. It's Commissioner Gordon's job to keep Gotham law and order. It's not Batman's job. Batman is an amateur, a vigilante. He's not a policeman. And one of the opening moments of genius in Batman Year One is Miller's decision to parallel the 2 stories of Commissioner, in this case Lieutenant Jim Gordon, who is coming to Gotham at the same time that Bruce Wayne is. Bruce Wayne is flying back home to return to stately Wayne Manor and to make a difference somehow. He doesn't know quite how. Whereas Jim Gordon has a pregnant wife and a mysteriously checkered career behind him. We don't learn any details of it. And he's looking for a second chance in the hellhole that is Gotham City. We see, Mazzucchelli shows us, he arrives by train. and we get a slightly below even look. We're looking slightly up at that, as if we were sort of squatted down with a camera on a tripod. He sent his wife in on the plane, but he himself is taking the train into Gotham City, whereas, as you can see, Bruce Wayne is flying in. And Gordon isn't happy with this. Gotham is a pit, and he knows it. But he figures this is the way to do it. He's not going to have his wife come to Gotham City on such a grimy transport that takes so long. Whereas when Bruce Wayne is flying in, he tells himself, we get parallel narratives here, Gordon and Bruce Wayne, in handwriting script. So the passages look like that. Gordon's is a little more legible. Bruce Wayne's is in cursive. But when Bruce Wayne is flying in, he says, maybe I should have come by train. It's important to know the ground that you're entering. But instead, he doesn't come. Instead, he comes by plane, but we still get a slightly below ground level, tiny bit looking up perspective shot. This great scene, which really can work without any dialogue, right? This is Bruce Wayne appearing at Wayne Manor. For the first time in a long, long time, he is home in this gigantic old pile, we're told, built as a fortress generations past to protect a fading line of royalty from an age of equals. And he's talking to his slain parents. He says, Mother, Father, it's good to be back. And we follow these parallels throughout this issue. Jim Gordon is an honest man. He is an upright man. He is a crusader for reform. And that puts him on the outside in Gotham, every bit as outside of Gotham as Bruce Wayne will be as Batman. Because in addition to being crime-ridden, or maybe because Gotham's police force is rotted from the top down. Police Commissioner Loeb is thoroughly corrupt. Detective Flass, who meets Gordon meets him at the train station, thoroughly corrupt, brutal, venal. The cops are the worst element of Gotham City. Flass tells Gordon when they first meet, a cop's got it made in Gotham. And Gordon quickly sees that. He quickly sees what that's like because he watches Flass just casually tear apart a kid who's just hanging around doing nothing. And when he shows Gordon the switchblade, it's a comb. And he doesn't care. The whole point was to exercise brutal police brutality. But look at the juxtaposition between this is Gordon's horrible awakening to what it's like to be a cop in Gotham City. At the same time, we get this completely stark, borderless, completely white image of Bruce Wayne kneeling at his parents' grave. Fantastic. Just fantastic. Now, this all happens in January, but time goes on. It's mid-February or it's late February when Flass goes to Commissioner Loeb and tells him, look, this Gordon guy just isn't working out. He's turning down bribes. He's hard on the men. The men are corrupt, and Loeb knows it. But Flass says maybe me and the boys should soften him up a little. And Flass agrees. Now, the whole time that this plan is going on, we see Bruce Wayne practicing. He's able to split a pile of bricks with one hand. Able to do serious damage to a tree trunk with his feet. He admits he has the method. He has the skills. He has the technique. He just doesn't have a way to present it. He doesn't have something to pull it all together yet. And you don't know yet at this point in the issue what the it is. Obviously, it's to clean up corruption. And when I read this first issue, I thought, okay, so this is a full-throated, just whole-cloth origin story of Batman. And again, I had the same questions that I always do, and these questions have been raised by many Batman writers over the decades, which is that if Bruce Wayne is not a psychopath, to assume that Bruce Wayne is not a psychopath, we have to assume that. Although in Batman Dark Knight Returns, that is not an active assumption. We have to assume that he's not a psychopath. And if he's not a psychopath, if he's not, in other words, maimed by the loss of his parents, just traumatized by it, then as a billionaire, there's a lot he could do to fix Gotham City. A lot he could do that doesn't involve putting on a costume, dressing like a bat, and beating up street-level drug dealers. But one way or another, the thought of doing any of those other things, like, for instance, pouring $1 million into a campaign to unseat Commissioner Loeb, instead of doing any of that, he is training at Wayne Manor. He is trying to figure out what to do, and figures that he needs to go on reconnaissance. He needs to dress up as a seedy army vet and go on reconnaissance. And that reconnaissance happens on the same night that the boys, the Flass and his friends, visit Jim Gordon and pummel him with baseball bats. They keep him out of the hospital, but they deliver a warning. Play ball, or worse will come. Play ball, or we'll do this, or we'll do worse to your wife. So we see Gordon taking that beating at the same time that we see Bruce Wayne walking the red light district of Gotham City. And attracting the attention of first a pimp who wants, violence, thinks the guy might be a plant of some kind on the part of the policeman. Bruce Wayne tells him in the understatement of the century, "I'm not a cop." But that interaction between the violent pimp and the disguised Bruce Wayne is being watched by a woman named Selina Kyle. And those are people who read these issues, this first issue, and were Batman fans, recognized that is Catwoman. Selina Kyle is Catwoman. So now we have, in addition to to Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne, we have Catwoman entering the picture. And those three, Jim Gordon, Bruce Wayne, and Catwoman, Selina Kyle, are going to be the linchpin of the whole series. The first encounter that Bruce Wayne has does not go well. He ends up brawling in the red light district with people who are only the victims of the pimp, not actual criminals themselves. And he ends up brawling with Selina Kyle. And that dust-up causes cops to notice. Cops show up and tell him to freeze. And Bruce Wayne thinks to himself, if I'm caught, it's all over. But before he can even do anything, keep in mind, this is Gotham City of Commissioner Loeb. This is not Commissioner Gordon. This is Commissioner Loeb's Gotham City, where the cops are violent and corrupt, and they just shoot him. In fact, they hit an artery, and they cuff him and they put him behind in the backseat of the cruiser. But they're not all that concerned with his well-being. And Bruce Wayne knows that he has to stop this from happening, so he snaps his cuffs and assaults the officers to get them and to crash the car. But he saves them. He pulls their bodies out of the fire, but he's a wreck. The whole incident leaves him a wreck. He's bleeding. A bullet hit an artery. He was in a crash. He was knifed in the leg. He's in really rough shape. Manages to get to his car and then drives basically on wounded autopilot back to Wayne Manor. At the same moment that Jim Gordon, their cars actually meet in the road. It's at the same moment that Jim Gordon is deciding that he can't let this sit. He learns from the police dispatch where Detective Flass is. He's playing poker with the boys. They went straight to their poker game from beating the crap out of him with baseball bats. He waits with his car darkened until all the boys have left and Flass is the last to leave. Follows Flass, forces him off the road, and beats the crap out of him. Leaves him naked and handcuffed by the side of the road. We're told he's big, Green Beret training. It's been 15 years since I had to take out a Green Beret. Even so, he deserves a handicap. And when Gordon is leaving, when he's driving away with the helpless, naked Flass handcuffed on the side of the road, he thinks to himself, well, Flass will never tell anyone that this happened, but he'll stay away from me and my wife. He'll get the point. It's a tiny moment of grim vindication. We actually have a line from Jim Gordon. He says, "Thanks, Flash, you've shown me what it takes to be a cop in Gotham City." At the same time, we cut to Wayne Manor, where Bruce Wayne has made it back. He rear-ended the car that was already in the driveway. He has staggered, leaving a blood trail, to his study, and is sitting there in his easy chair in this library, wondering what on earth. I'd rather die than wait another hour. I am totally impatient to get about this, but I have no idea what to do. None whatsoever. And keep in mind, he's dying. He's bleeding out. He has his hand on a little bell that will summon Alfred the butler, who has combat medic training. But he isn't sure that he should ring it. He's not sure what... He needs direction. And just like in the comics and in Batman Dark Knight Returns, direction comes in the form of a bat that flies to the bust of his father and sits there. And we see Bruce Wayne smiling, where he says, "I shall become a bat." And the last thing we see is that he rings the bell. So we know that he's going to survive. And that moment, this panel especially, is straight out of the very earliest Batman origin stories, where a bat comes through the window of Bruce Wayne's study and he says, "Criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot. I will become a bat in order to frighten them. I need to put fear into them." Only in all of those earlier moments, it's not Bruce Wayne in a combat jacket bleeding to death, desperate and bruised and knifed and everything. It's just Bruce Wayne just sitting in his study. Here it's supercharged with dramatics. And I would maintain that first issue, I realize it's going to be a parallel with the first issue of Batman Dark Knight Returns, and I'm not sure how much Matthew is trusting me, or any of the rest of you that went along for the ride with that first one, because the first issue of Batman Dark Knight Returns also works really well. This issue, I say, works really well. It gives us two heroes that we can root for, and it gives us a whole bunch of venal, physical, brutal evil that we want to root against. So by the end of the first issue, we are hooked into this story. We have a Bruce Wayne who has no idea what he's doing. We have a Jim Gordon who knows the forces that are lined up against him. We have two good men, both of them facing the horrible corruption that is Gotham City. And basically, it's a co-joined origin story. So we get that, and we are catapulted into the next issue. I'm hoping that all of you who read Dark Knight Returns and maybe didn't like it have read this issue and did like it and are eager to move on. We shall see. It seems like Matthew enjoyed it. So I'm going to leave a link to his video down below, and we will convene next week, when hopefully I can do this on the weekend instead of on a weekday. We will convene next week for part 2 of Batman Year One. So I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.